You've probably heard of the Trail of Tears, when indigenous people of this land of the United States of America were forced to leave their homes that they'd had for countless generations to relocate in what was later to be called the state of Oklahoma. This forced movement was caused by colonialists from Europe who wanted to now be owning this country, was based on the fact that the indigenous natives had created land that was incredibly fertile and managed perfectly. So yeah, they wanted it and they didn't want to pay for it. So they got all kinds of laws passed, and that's a whole other story. The reason that I'm bringing that up now in this One White Woman podcast is because my guest, Derrick Smith, whom I just enjoyed conversation with so much, his ancestors are linked into that trail of tears of native indigenous that were forced to march across Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Missouri, to that Indian territory, which later became the state of Oklahoma. His family, on one side of his family, it's Black, from Africa originally, of course. And so, but they had to leave for the safety of their own lives. We're pretty familiar with that. But how many of us know that the combined tragedies of forcing the indigenous along with the Blacks of Africa who were trying to escape there are no words. Anyway, their lives combined in the Indian territory in what is now the state of Oklahoma, and they thrived. At a certain point, the whole thing shifted. There are many details and wrinkles and the way people interact with each other, details that some are pretty, some are not. But Derrick gives us a whole education in this conversation that I would have liked to have talked to him for another couple of hours at least. But anyway, here we are. Thank you for joining me on the One White Woman podcast. And my name is Nini White. And, I am so glad you're here because we have a lot of learning to do. And I think it's really important if we have an attitude that the more we know, the more we know and learn, the more we can move forward in a straight path of clarity and better assurance that we won't repeat any of our ugly history. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for being here.
Welcome, Derrick Smith. Really good to have this time that we can share and learn about what you're doing. I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
So you and I met through the Black Achievement Fund, which is a really marvelous organization. And now you are with Blacktown Tours. Tell me what Blacktowns Freedom Fund. I'm sorry, Blacktowns Freedom Fund. You have to correct me. There's so many.
Yeah, so obviously, prior to the Blacktowns Freedom Fund, you were more familiar with the Blacktowns Tour. So that's what.
Yes.
And so I am the founder of the 13 Blacktowns Tour, which started as the Blacktowns Motorcycle Tour. And that was in 2019. I conceptualized it, I think, as far back as 2014. Launched it in 2019, had it for the third time this year. It expanded to include people that don't ride motorcycles. So that's how the 13 Blacktowns Tour came about. And through all of that, it has evolved into the Blacktowns Freedom Fund, which the tours still go on, but things are just going to the next level. I've always had the idea of an organization, a foundation to serve the more traditional mayors that are in place of the Blacktowns, or that are in the leadership of the Blacktowns. And so I always had this vision of creating an entity to help service them, and obviously have some more youthful people to do the legwork while they can provide the experience and wisdom. And so the Blacktowns Freedom Fund definitely is what that's about in a sense. It's a lot more. It's me evolving through the Black Achievement Fund and everything that I learned over there and experienced. And so this is the next step up for us.
Beautiful. And that's what happens with life. You know, we think we're going in one direction, and then it's just so interesting. If things don't keep progressing, but we keep progressing, then we have to just follow that lead that's pulling us. Does that kind of seem true to you?
Yeah, most definitely.
So I was going through the information on your, I think, youngblackmayor.com website.
Yeah.
And I came to a conclusion that your flow is teaching, opening others' awareness about opportunities, other Black people's awareness about opportunities for safe and prosperous living that they could be experiencing and growing into, and then creating connections to make all of that happen.
Absolutely.
And so what I would love to see is that you right now in this conversation help us in those specifics of what you're doing in those areas of teaching, opening people's awareness, and creating connections. And then, I'm sorry, in part of that opening awareness, because my audience is basically white, I would love white people to really understand the danger that Black people experience and sense every day in this country.
Okay.
I mean, if that seems appropriate to you.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
That's appropriate. I do consider myself a remedy in a sense for helping, non-Black people to be able to understand, evoke the emotion that we feel through all of the trial and tribulation. However, for me, it's really a love thing for me. And so I don't want them to feel the sorrow,
Right.
but I want them to be able to relate on the highest level. And so, that only comes, through empathy. And so my whole movement is very much firstly about education.
Yeah.
Because everybody needs to be educated.
Yes.
Black people, white people, yellow, purple, all the colors,
Right. Right.
It's a priority with me being Black,
Yeah.
to educate my people, because the priority is, the agenda is different. The mission for my people is a little bit different than my mission for you,
Sure.
because it's us, it's our life, it's our destiny, it's all in our hands when it comes down to it. Hey, sweetheart, bring me a bottle of water, please. And so, excuse me.
We can pause if you want.
I started to get some water before.
Yeah.
But so it's very much about education first and foremost. I didn't know about Black Wall Street till I was 21 years old. I'm from Oklahoma. I was raised with the public school curriculum. Okay. I didn't know the meaning of being from a historically all Black town until I became an adult, and I didn't know about the Trail of Tears. I didn't really receive what the Trail of Tears, just that phrase, and then that whole history, until I was very much an adult. And the Trail of Tears, that's Oklahoma history, but that's the injustice of the Native Americans and Indian removal.
Right.
That's a big part of Blacktown history, whether people know it or not. At least Oklahoma's Black towns, and the most successful Black towns that we can look at as models, they were in Indian territory. So just in terms of my identity and knowing my history and the story of where I'm from, even being from a Black town and being Native American, I still didn't know those things. Yeah. And so if I can help it, nobody around me that is in tune to what I've got going on is going to experience that, ever again. And so education is the first priority. It's a self-identity education. That's regardless of what race you are.
Yeah.
So what I teach with the Blacktowns and with my own history and culture, and my shit is what I call it, my story, my history, my identity, my
Yeah.
truth,
Yeah.
then that goes for everybody. Just use me as an example, how I was able to tap into my story, history, identity, my truth, through self-identity education and what I'm teaching through my guides, really putting history into context, why things are in our society the way that they look today, how that relates and how that parallels to the past. History holds all the answers to all of our issues right now. And that's the reason we are not taught it the way it's supposed to be taught.
Right. And so while you're taking a swig of water, I want to ask you, how has learning that history impacted your life, your sense of yourself, your values moving forward? I mean, I heard some of my family history, and it didn't have that much of it was kind of cool, but it didn't have that much history. But maybe that's just because I'm white and I didn't have any terrible challenges,
Well, it's more so about determining your purpose. Even when we get away from, racism and trying to fix what's wrong with our systems, with history, because I definitely believe first and foremost, that's how we end systemic racism. We teach at the lowest level the truth about our history. We use these fabulous examples that I'm bringing to the forefront.
Yeah.
And kids that are coming into positions of power within our system in the future, they'll know the truth and reality about, everyone, if their self first and foremost. And so, even when you get away from that part of it, trying to solve our system, the self-identity education is going to allow for you to determine your purpose in life, your journey, where you want to go. The reason you may have such a passion to fix cars, not you specifically, but just giving an example.
Yeah.
Maybe your grandfather was a mechanic. Maybe it runs in your family, it runs in your blood. And so when we're growing up, with these dreams of being an NBA a basketball player or a movie star, and not realizing that, you're only going to grow to about 5'8", when you know these things about the past and about your family and about your genetic makeup, your history, if your family served in any wars, if they were slaves, if they were slave masters, your nationality, your purpose, you can live out your truth. You can work within your truth, and you can build based on who you truly are. I mean, what we're talented at naturally, that's our purpose. And I don't feel like it's put that simple for us. And we're not put those examples in front of us. For instance, I was reading about Wiley Post and Will Rogers yesterday because I'm editing a book that I have called Oklahoma Black Facts coming out. Now, they're not Black, but I see their name all over Oklahoma. And so just upon studying, editing my book, I got to Bill Pickett, who was friends with Will Rogers. Bill Pickett was the inventor of steer wrestling, bulldogging, and he was part of
wrestling.
Steer wrestling. You jump off.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So Bill Pickett, he was born in Texas but raised in Oklahoma, native of this area. He invented that. Him and Will Rogers. There's a fascinating story about being in Madison Square Garden and the bull got loose up into the stands, and Will and Bill subdued the bull and nobody got hurt. And from there, they made history together in their own right. Either way, the airport is named after Will Rogers in Oklahoma. I went to a Will Rogers elementary school. I see his name everywhere. And then when I looked him up, he was like the most impactful and famous and humorous movie star of his times in silent films and then into the talkies
Right.
during that time frame, of such racial transgression.
Yeah.
And him being a native of Oklahoma means so much to me. That's a part of my pride.
Ha, ha, ha.
Even with him not being Black,
Ha, ha,
you know what I'm saying? And so we just need to know these things need to be expounded on. It's in my opinion.
yeah.
And so that's what I'm bringing with the fun and the education part of the fun. That's the long version of it, but it's pretty exciting.
Well, what I love about it is that because I'm sure that blacks and whites were very much interacting then without a lot of rancor or problems. Is that true, or am I wrong about that with Will Rogers?
Well, Will Rogers was really active throughout the 20s, into the 30s. He passed away at about 1935.
Uh-huh.
So no, nationally, no, not necessarily, but you always have the isolated relationships between,
Okay.
people of opposite colors.
Okay.
All throughout, I mean, we've always had allies.
Right.
Throughout history. There's been,
Right.
camaraderie and intermingling of people of different colors and races. So,
Sure.
it's just one of those stories with Will Rogers. I mean, that didn't happen to be, a part of his character,
Okay.
and prejudice and bigotry wasn't a part of his character, obviously.
Okay. Yeah, I keep what I find that I keep doing with you, Derrick, is trying to put you in a box, and you just keep expanding that, so I love that. So sometimes I will say things that seem kind of stupid or something, but thank you for you're such a gentleman.
I've been putting myself into the edutainer box.
Huh.
I think it's very much a mixture of, obviously education, and then the entertainment background that I have as a performer and a creative, with the music and stuff like that. And so maybe I explain things, in that manner. I don't know, but it's good that I don't fit into any specific box.
Yes, it is. Yes, it definitely is. Okay, so that's the education part, and then opening up people's awareness about opportunities for them. What comes to my mind, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, which I appreciate, is that it seems, are you wanting to create awareness of Black people in really tense, huh?
So to sum up the education part of it,
Oh, okay.
It's really educating people on the legacy of America's historically all Black towns, and so that's for everyone,
Right.
So knowing about the towns first and foremost,
Yes.
that's the education part, and so that is the service you receive by becoming a member of, well, not a member, it's a subscription. It's not a membership actually, but by subscribing to the Blacktowns Freedom Fund, you receive education materials. I'm your educator, obviously, and your #1 history influencer. And then we transition into being able to actually connect people with land ownership opportunities in the Black towns and business opportunities in the Black towns. And so it's very much still serving the mission and the purpose of reestablishing and revitalizing the Black towns. But so that's how that works. And then I'm active within the towns. I work closely with the mayors of the 13 historically Black towns in Oklahoma. And then on a national level, I'm becoming more and more familiar with mayors of not just nationwide, but worldwide through the World Conference of Mayors with Dr. Johnny Ford. I'll be becoming a lot more active with that group. And Dr. Johnny Ford is the current mayor of Tuskegee, Alabama. Okay. And so just being able to actually connect people with the actual infrastructure that still exists in terms of Black towns and settlements, our historically Black towns and settlements, they're still there. And so when we hear about Black Wall Street, which a lot of people are familiar with right now with the 100-year anniversary of the massacre, the centennial, right. That is the ultimate example. Right. But hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 versions of Black Wall Street were nationwide, whether actual incorporated towns or just Black settlements.
Yeah.
But it's a history of our entire nation. And that's where, the reality that it's come to for me. And so the Blacktowns Freedom Fund is about, taking the model that I have with Oklahoma and being able to help other people to tap into that legacy and that history wherever they are. Black people, first and foremost, because we want to reestablish these safe spaces and these segregated economies, self-sustaining economies, because we still need that. Just like Chinatown and Little Italy. I mean, we still need that as a people. And so that is the actual infrastructure that I have to build upon. And so here we are with the Blacktowns Freedom Fund. And ultimately, we're recreating freedom in these spaces. And just the education part again, everybody needs to know that Black people attain the highest level of freedom, their highest level, our highest level in America, when we controlled and inhabited our own independent towns. And so Oklahoma is a great example of that. We have 13 historically all Black towns that still exist. My grandmother being born in 1946, even when the Ku Klux Klan was just 20 miles away, she didn't experience racism at that level because of the protection she had living in a historically all Black town. So when we talk about a solution, and what our history shows, at what point do we begin to try to work back towards this, even if it's just in a mental capacity, so that we can recreate this freedom of oppression that Black people have experienced that are experiencing nowadays.
But what comes to me is, I get all wound up with fear and anxiety about when Black people establish themselves in really successful ways together, then some faction of white people can't stand it and they have to destroy it. So what will you do? There must be a plan that you have for protecting and never letting that happen again. I want to be on that team, by the way.
Well, I mean, it's standard to protect your community. It's standard with our American military, the example that they set in terms of protecting a nation. We just, we scale that down, and we go off the same model and example, American model that we have. I don't believe it's that much hatred, to where in 2021, they're coming to burn down our establishments and our communities again. You know what I mean? I firmly believe that, in this day and age, and I guess, through the president, our last president and stuff like that, maybe everybody's going to think I'm wrong. But I think that to really be racist, you have to do it on the down low. You know what I mean?
No.
And I mean, I feel like that, so.
Wait, but what did you mean? You have to do it on the down low. What does that mean?
What I mean is we're getting further and further away from universal bonding. I mean, closer. We're getting closer and closer to universal bonding. And those who are racist and have such hatred are going to be isolated into the dark, basically.
With all my heart, I hope you're
corner in the dark somewhere.
With all my heart.
First of all, I believe there's that much ignorance among white people, but I don't believe there's that much hatred among our white brothers and sisters, Americans.
I've spent most of my life not looking at anything awful and horrible and scary and mean and hateful. And since George Floyd's murder, I've decided that I needed to stop being such a little baby delicate flower.
You need to stop being so timid.
Yes.
In your approach.
Yes. And so I have looked at a lot of things, that a lot of the ugly underbelly of this country. I'm not trying to talk you out of because I love where you're coming from. I love that you even could have that perspective after the whole history. I am in awe, but I am I am not a fearful person, but I am afraid of the ignorance in this country because, you know,
Well,
there's organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center and the ACLU that deal with those factions, and they have a lot of work to do. So
yeah. Well,
I don't,
see,
yeah,
I'm a native of Oklahoma right now. On the surface is very uh, Republican, conservative, uh, non-colorful,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I'm still, and it's crazy. Oklahoma is like the blackest, whitest state because I am, despite all of that, and every county has been red, I think in the past like 4 or 5 years or 10 years,
uh-huh,
but every single county in Oklahoma. But
uh-huh.
I am still from the land of the free and the promised land for African American people. Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street was burned down
Yeah,
because it was in the middle of non-Black authority and establishment.
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Historically, Black towns were secluded and independent.
yes,
You know, they were sundown towns too.
uh-huh.
You were
Wow,
not friendly to the Black community.
wow,
You had no business being there after the sun went down,
right.
or just before the sun went down. You should be gone. And so there's a fascinating history. I mean, it gets so deep, and I don't want to go into, so many different layers without
Yeah,
sticking to what we need to speak about today.
right.
But I do believe that, where I'm from in terms of how free we have been throughout the history of Black Oklahoma, Black Calabasas is what I call it now. Um, it's there. There's 13 historically Black towns. They're completely self-governed. They're in possession of elder Black folks, so they're not necessarily uh, being built out to invite people to come there,
Yeah,
but they're still the foundation that we have to create these places for my people to go,
yeah,
And
yeah,
so it's very much exciting to me. And, you know, um, I just don't believe that there's going to be this big force against us, because the force that's there it's already there. So we've already been dealing with it. We're dealing with it now.
right.
And so we take the proper precautions and protocols to protect ourselves like any community would.
Sure, sure.
But, I think there's a big white demographic that's just going to be a part of the whole energy, that brings this into a successful fruition.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I personally, I guess I've experienced racism, but I've had such fabulous white brothers and sisters my whole life that maybe I'm just ignorant to the hatred that's really out there. But I'm just super positive about it. I really don't have any
Yeah.
worries. I'm not really not worried.
Good,
I'm really
good,
not worried.
good, good. You're not worried, but you're also prepared.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely prepared. Oklahoma's open carry. So
Oh, okay.
the Blacktowns motorcycle tour.
Yes.
Yeah, so the Blacktowns motorcycle tour. The mission of the tour is to revitalize the historically Black towns through tourism, education, and entertainment. And so the motorcycle culture, they're real big about getting out and riding and going on these rides to various places other people probably don't care to go to. And so the concept came about with motorcycles because I wanted to make the statement of visiting all 13 Black towns in one day.
Right.
And so when I considered, who could do that, it was like motorcycle riders, and so that's how it started. Initially, the first time in 2019, it takes place Labor Day weekend every year.
Okay.
So 2019 on that Friday, Labor Day weekend, we met up and then we left Langston, Oklahoma, which is the furthest west of our Black towns, where Langston University is the furthest west of the HBCUs. And so we started there in Langston and we visited all 13 in one day, the
Wow.
entire state of Oklahoma, all of the Black towns. And it took about 14 hours actually. And so we have since spread it we've spread it out over the course of 4 days. We went to just the entire weekend last year
Yeah.
and 4 days now. That way, you know, the motorcycles still do their tour on the weekend in the middle. And then people that don't ride, you know, can link up with me that Thursday evening. We'll start the festivities, a welcome festival, concerts throughout the weekend. And it goes all the way through Sunday night, through Monday morning, actual Labor Day. And
Beautiful.
so anybody can be a part of it, regardless if you ride motorcycles or not. And that's at 13blacktowns.tour.com, the number 13 Blacktowns Tour. Yeah, so the motorcycle part of it, I don't ride. So, you know, I don't ride motorcycles. And so that's hard. And so if that helps those of y'all that
Oh,
don't
wait,
ride,
wait, wait. Your sound is cutting out.
okay.
Do you have a headset?
Probably somewhere.
I'll pause.
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you, but I think you have to sit closer. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so I don't ride motorcycles, even though I established the Blacktowns Motorcycle Tour, and so that helps for people that don't ride to understand that it's not a big deal for you to come Labor Day weekend
Yeah.
to these towns. You know, you don't have to ride. You can be a part of the non-riding group. I do lead the motorcycles. I do lead the tour, and so I have some leg captains from various motorcycle clubs, and you know we'll be growing. It'll be growing.
Yeah.
It'll be growing. So you know, regardless of who you are, if you're interested in seeing the actual infrastructure of our historically Black towns,
Yeah.
only the most successful Black town in American history. There's buildings as early as 1905. That were built in 1905 that are still standing there. And so it's pretty fascinating to look at. People should understand that 13 historically Black towns have fallen by the wayside
Why is that?
economically because of technology, just because of trends and ultimately, originally, you know, going back to the beginning of their decline, we have the Great Depression, you know, of the 30s. The Dust Bowl came through Oklahoma. The land got bad for a while because there was so much farming going on during those times. And the industrialization
Okay.
started taking people to, you know, the inner cities and the port cities.
Okay.
To gain employment during the Great Depression. So the
Okay.
migration out of this place. And then for the Black towns, you know, desegregation, you know, so integration of the public schools. Ultimately, that, you know, broke the Black towns. That was the final straw. Um, all of our resources, you know, got sent out of our communities, you know, and so that's a big part of, you know, the Black Towns Freedom Fund and understanding, you know, group economics and self-sustainability
Yeah.
through our own economies.
Yeah.
The schools in the Black towns were much of the hub,
Yeah.
education, you know, services with employment, you know, and pride when it comes to mascots. Think about your favorite team or your high school or, you know, a little league team that you were a part of.
Yeah.
It's just part of our fabric as Americans that we instill so much pride, you know, in civic and social
Yeah.
activity, you know, in regard to sports and our mascots and how we represent ourselves. We take so quickly and so strongly to our mascot. And so when you think about that, and you think about our schools closing down and our children
Mm,
being bussed out of our communities,
interesting.
it's similar. You can compare that to assimilation of the Native Americans, in regard to stripping them of their language and
Yeah,
their customs and,
yeah,
you know, and so I don't know if people think about it on that level, but this is our American history of our historically Black towns. This is where Black people were free. If we have BLM and we have this media and this reality of police brutality and racial oppression,
right.
on the flip side, even me being a native of this history, this
Yeah,
place,
yeah,
I wasn't taught this. So people don't know this flip side or this alternative. If people know this alternative, then maybe we can begin to work towards something that's an actual solution.
yeah,
Um, Self-segregation,
yeah,
you know, we typically, there's a stigma on segregation, the
yeah,
term,
right.
even though there's a possibility to segregate out of love and out of strength, power, and protection.
And self-respect.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, if you can't get it elsewhere, what you gonna do?
right.
You create a space to where you can at least treat yourself and each other equally as the rest of the world in the systems that exploit us.
Exactly.
Creating our own system, essentially, Black Calabasas. So, yeah.
I
Um,
love it.
Examples are there for us. I'm not making this stuff up. I don't just pull this stuff out of anywhere.
Yeah,
But that's the importance of getting, like my Blacktowns history curriculum,
yeah,
because putting it all into context, putting it into perspective,
yeah,
telling you about certain places and things that happened in the past in regard to Black people's success and actually, again, their freedom, the closest we've gotten to freedom or the highest level of freedom that we've attained. That's right where it is in this history of our Black towns.
one of the ways that my culture has been poisoned against your culture is those lies and negative narratives about the abilities and intelligence and skills of Black people. There's just this poisonous narrative in the background from the history of everything. So if there were these towns that were built up that were successful, that we as white people, I hate that term, white people could see, we just have to leave them alone and they can just, the sky's the limit, there's no limit. So that would be so healing for all of us to see that. So wow, I just applaud what you're doing. Yeah.
So
For everybody's sake.
the Reverend Sir Solomon Jones, SS Jones, in the 1920s, he had a camera and he filmed Black people in these communities all throughout Oklahoma.
Yeah.
He traveled internationally,
Yeah.
and that is public domain. You can see these films, online, on YouTube.
Reverend SS.
Yeah, I'll send you a link to the whole library of these films.
Please.
Okay. And so this history is very much there. Oklahoma history is dangerous. If you can understand Oklahoma history, you can decode America.
Wow.
Okay. It's
Wow.
Oklahoma is just a microcosm of America.
Wow.
The Native Americans were placed here.
Yeah.
It was a promised land for Black people. That's why we have so many Black towns, whether people know it or not.
Yeah.
And so obviously it's a land of success for white people, and the land runs and, economic white people who were economic refugees coming from other places. So you can't just look at it as negative, or not all white people were coming here for land to take the land from the Indians or the Black folks. You know, it was another white lady that gave me that term, economic refugees. Because if you think about it, you know, just Americans in general, from women and children not being sufficiently provided for in our history.
Right.
You know, that's not a color thing.
Right,
You know, the white community experienced that. So when you think of people just needing a place to go or needing some land to pursue the American dream, and you don't even think about the color of it, even though that's very much a part of it. I know that first and foremost. I'm the #1 history influencer from Oklahoma.
Sure.
I know that, and I can teach that to you. But when you just think of people needing to be provided for and taken care of, or to be able to have a way to take care of themselves,
Yes.
you know, Oklahoma history is unrivaled in that sense.
Wow.
Far and Away, wasn't that Tom Cruise? They had the land run in the movie. I need to watch that movie. When I was a little kid, I saw it, but I didn't know what it meant back then.
What movie?
A Far and Away, I believe. They do a land run. I think Tom Cruise is in there. I gotta double check and look that up. That just came to mind.
I don't know about that.
There were several movies. True Grit, I believe, you know, was Oklahoma history. One thing people got to understand: the Wild Wild West. These old westerns and Bonanza and John Wayne and all of that stuff. When we hear Wild Wild West, I think that commonly takes our mind to California.
Right.
But that was Indian territory. That was Oklahoma, because there was such lawlessness. And remember, you know, westward expanding all the way from the east.
Yeah.
You know, that's why they only removed the Native Americans just west of the Mississippi River. That's barely halfway across America.
Yeah.
Because we were not established that far west yet. So when you see the Wild Wild West, cowboys and Indians, that's Indian Territory, Oklahoma. You know, and the hidden history of that is that there were so many Black and red lawmen and outlaws. You know, the famous Bass Reeves, who they say, you know, Tonto is modeled after. Bass Reeves arrested 3,000 felons, felonious outlaws in Indian Territory. Like, that's the real story. Like, he's a real guy. You can verify him.
Wow.
And so, yeah, the Wild Wild West very much was Oklahoma.
Wow.
And so the whole story just has to be told. You know, these Native nations, the 5 Indian nations, you know, they had slaves. It was thousands and thousands of African slaves that traveled on the Trail of Tears with their Indian masters, you know? And so, absolutely. I'm a by-blood citizen of the Chickasaw Nation, right? But I'm also a descendant.
How far back?
I mean, as far back as I can go, I can trace back to the 1700s.
Wow.
The late 1700s. But it's a fact. The reason why it's fascinating, and I don't trace back that far to a Black person, because while I'm by blood Indian on one side because of Jesse McGee, who was an Indian man who married a Black woman when it was forbidden to do so in about 1898.
Wow.
On the flip side, that Black woman, her parents were owned by a half white, half Chickasaw lady. So with my tribe, the Chickasaw Nation and the 5 civilized tribes, they were very much mixed blood groups of people before they were removed from the South, from their homelands. They had already taken up Southern plantation style slavery, and that's why they fought to uphold the institution of slavery. Wow. With the Confederacy during the Civil War. See, Oklahoma is so fascinating when it comes to slavery. If you were a slave in Oklahoma, you were a slave of an Indian citizen, not a white.
Whoa. And did Indians treat Black slaves better than white people treated Black slaves?
That is a big myth.
Okay.
That is a myth that is out there. I mean, I guess with you asking that, it's almost as if that's what you heard.
No,
but maybe,
no, I just want to believe it.
Yeah, because you didn't even know that.
No, I didn't.
There is an interesting dynamic with the intermingling of African and Native Americans.
Yeah.
But when it came to the institution of slavery, it was no better, in the Indian nations. In a lot of instances, it was worse. And think about
Wow.
this, since there was such a close eye on the Native nations because of their relationship and the dealings with the government,
Right.
there's so much documentation of
Wow.
this history and these occurrences.
Wow.
Slavery ended in Indian territory almost a year after it did in the United States.
Wow.
These Indian slave masters were reluctant to let their slaves go.
Wow.
They were violent against them.
Wow.
It's a deep history.
Wow.
With me being by blood and being a descendant, originally my family was placed on the freedmen rolls with when the Dawes Commission came to Oklahoma to enroll the land in severalty or individually to Indians. And
I don't know what any of that means.
yeah, see, yeah, this, and that's why I'm so passionate
Yeah.
about this, because it matters. So this simplified,
Yes, it does.
the whole dynamic of our nation.
Yes.
I mean, so you know about Native American removal, right?
Yes. 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 Yes.
Moving the Native Americans from their homelands west of the
Yes.
Mississippi.
Yes. Yes.
Didn't know that these Native nations were split factions because they had white mixed blood members
Huh.
that wanted to uphold the institution of slavery. And then you had the factions that were more close to traditional or full blood.
Okay.
And then you just had people that was in the middle, regardless of how much blood they had. They might have been full blood and still wanted to have slaves,
Yeah.
But it's an interesting dynamic, and it's documented to the T in terms of slave masters and ownership and reestablishing those Indian nations here in Oklahoma, then Indian territory. So if you look on my Instagram, there's a map of where the slaves were throughout Oklahoma, Indian territory,
Okay.
where they were situated mostly, the areas. And even like with the Chickasaw Nation was ran by the Colberts, politically dominated by the Colberts, a mixed blood white family for
Okay.
about 6 years. And that's who held my family in bondage, on the Chickasaw side of things. And it's interesting because with these Black towns, again, bringing it back, see all of this history that's surrounded just by me touching on like the Black towns.
My head is exploding.
So going back to the Black towns, these towns were successful, and it's proven because the 13 that still exists, for once, let's scale down to just my hometown of Tatum's, Oklahoma.
Okay.
It's the furthest Black town south. It's the only historically Black town left in the Chickasaw Nation. Okay. Chickasaw Nation, and we'll get to some maps and things after this. Like, we're gonna do a lot of talking after this. But the Chickasaw Nation is in the central part of Oklahoma, the south central part of Oklahoma, essentially. And it goes all the way down to Texas to the Red River. That's the border. And so slavery didn't end in the Chickasaw Nation until 1866, okay, almost a year after it ended in the United States.
Right.
And from that point on, former slaves of the tribe or any Black people in the tribal nation, they were not citizens of the tribe, and they were not citizens of the United States.
Right.
Until Oklahoma became a state in 1907.
Wow.
So 41 years, essentially, we were aliens. So we didn't have a relationship with funding, or support from any nation.
No relations and no rights.
When we built these Black towns, we built them essentially with no support.
Wow.
Fresh out of slavery, out of bondage.
Wow.
Our skill sets, when you were talking about, your community and in terms of, the capabilities,
right,
and the intelligence of Black people,
right,
and, myths or the stereotype that prevails,
right,
if you think about it, it's almost ignorant unless you just don't believe in slavery, because
Right.
people, these Black folks built everything. They have all
Right.
the skill sets.
I know. It just doesn't,
They're
yeah.
proven in
Yeah.
every capacity that they're intelligent, with so many patents and things that we have, and
Right.
all the things that we created in slavery to build America.
Right. Right.
That's almost insane
It is. I agree.
to allow that sentiment in that storyline to prevail.
100%.
But yes, so Tatum's was founded and it got its post office in 1896. So if that's a decade before these Black people became citizens of any nation, so you're telling me we had a relationship with the federal government and we got granted a post office?
Yeah.
I mean, we had to be doing something right.
Yeah.
These are real towns. So Tatum's founded in 1896, a decade before Oklahoma became a state, and it still exists to this day. And the population is probably around 100 or less. We're not gonna get into Black people not doing what they're supposed to do, but that's a big much of a part of it for me. It's our priority. I mean, I can't expect anybody else to build this. I can't expect a reparation to be able to recreate this freedom that historically is right there. We had the story, the blueprint is there. Who am I going to point the finger at more than anybody other than what I'm capable of doing right now? I understand there's police brutality and there's a lot of force in a war against us.
Right.
But ultimately, in my own right and the own power bestowed in us, we've done it before, we can do it again.
That's right. I just love the solutions oriented, self-responsibility, self-determination mindset. Yeah.
Blacktowns.solutions. Blacktowns.solutions.
Yep.
And so it's a solution in there, regardless where you're from, regardless what race.
Right.
The Blacktowns, it's a transfer of information, the Blacktowns Freedom Fund. So regardless of race, you can be a part of it because you'll get the education first and foremost.
Wow.
You don't have to be active with the movement of any sort if you don't want to. I'm first and foremost in terms of just personally, and then as a leader.
Yeah.
I'm not really wanting to go the route of marching or trying to pass legislation. Economics at the end when Dr. King, before he met his demise, he was really speaking about economics and the bigger picture, group economics, versus inclusion and integration. And so we just have to study that a little bit more closely and stop being ashamed to be individual in a social or group sense, a racist sense. We are individuals. I mean, we're not the same in terms of our appearance and our culture, in our heritage.
Yeah.
But we are very much the same in terms of humanity.
Yes.
And so this is very much a movement about everybody and a learning process for everybody, because these towns are an example of American resilience and determination.
So inspiring, Derrick. My head and my heart are exploding right now. I want to get that material from you and upload it. And I want to edit this video properly to really help people get this education, because I want you to, that was such a beautiful conclusion, but I would just say that someone just sent me some history of she's telling me something that, is important for this path that I'm on of learning about Black lives in America, about some slave woman that accomplished something, and all that's fine, but let's move forward. Let's move this whole picture forward to what is now and what is right there to be achieved if we just see it and grab it.
Right. It's the same with, I think what she wants you to do is get an inspiration. You know, these stories are supposed to inspire us versus, you know, just be examples of our dark past.
Right.
You know, and I think that's probably, you know, most people's intentions.
Sure.
They want to show you an example of somebody overcoming. Um, but just like Will Rogers, you know, those examples in that pride, you know, in Wiley Post, at Wiley Post, we didn't get to Wiley, you know, he was the first to fly around the world solo, you know. He grew up in Maysville. Maysville's like 20 minutes from Tatum's, where I grew up at, you know, and he had one eye when he did it, you know, and he went to jail for robbery in his early 20s, like, you know, but you know, and so we need those stories,
Yes.
those examples. Obviously, you know, that's what entertainment is. We subscribe to other stories and these TV shows, and they're all stories. Well, history has the best stories, true stories.
Yes.
And so how is there a disconnect between us wanting and being motivated to learn history and know history, but we love entertainment and these stories about these people and what they did? And so, you know, I'm all about connecting that and bringing this into the trend and knowing what examples to give, when to give them, and what to say. Again, putting it all into context to where it helps, instead of just seems like we're trying to, you know, point the finger or bring up some dark past.
Exactly. I mean, that's what is just so sad to me, that some white people are so afraid of finding out the history, when it's actually, it's healing to get this knowledge.
Yeah,
especially from the lens that you provide, Derrick.
Well, that's cool. I thank you for that. I like that. That's what I try. That's what I'm trying to do. I often say, and I think it's because of my experience with my white students. I work. I haven't been active lately, but because I've really learned how to really teach through the internet, you know, and through these social platforms. But I have been very active in the classroom in the past as a substitute teacher. And, you know, I've been into a lot of predominantly white schools, from elementary to middle school to high school. And the kids love me so much, you know what I mean? But, you know, I'm one to realize the same way I feel Black kids don't know their history and they need to know it for self-identity education, and to get to their purpose earlier. It's the same with white kids.
Sure it is.
And then my mind goes to, well, if these white children, and of course, you know, when they're at an age where it's appropriate for them to learn and know this stuff, whatever age that is, you know, middle school, obviously, at the earliest, in some cases, depending on what we're talking about. But if these white children learn the story of Emmett Till when they were around his age, if they knew the realities of the hatred that America has, not white people, but America had historically. And obviously, if white people were the majority, then it was white people. I mean, that's our reality. We can't be ashamed by that. But I feel that if my white students I know, if they knew this stuff, they wouldn't want that to be a representation of them.
Exactly.
And they would be more motivated. They would know how. They would have a better understanding of their role and their position in this current day society in terms of fixing our systems.
Right. Healing them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they will.
For everyone's benefit. For everyone's benefit.
And it's that simple. And so I have a curriculum, a big curriculum that's going to come probably maybe at the end of next year. It's going to be my last curriculum. I already have all my stuff planned out, what I'm teaching. And so, but it's definitely the ending racism curriculum. We're going to get people certified on knowing how to end systemic racism.
Okay, sign me up.
When I say racism, you always got to just know I'm saying systemic racism. Racism is within our system. system
Right.
because, prejudice is always, it's always going to be around.
Uh-huh.
That's a man thing, not a race thing. That's a human nature thing.
Seems to be
But,
globally,
but
universally. Yeah.
systematically,
Mhm.
we've got to fix it, and it can be fixed. It definitely can. We're in control. How can it not be fixed and we're in control? So absolutely.
You are the man. You are the man. You told me this was going to be a good conversation, and I knew that it would be, but I didn't know how good. So
I got
thank you, Derrick.
2 keys to the city passed down from Dr. Martin Luther King, so to put confirmation on what I'm doing. So he wanted me to know that I'm on the track that I'm supposed to be on.
Yeah, you are.
2 keys to the city, one in 2012 and one in 2019. And the mayor didn't give them to me per se, but the person the mayor gave them to me both times with no intentions originally to give them to me. Didn't even know that it was me the second time 7 years later that he gave another key to the city. And he's not a native of Oklahoma. He's not from here. He's just passing through both times.
So how did this happen? What?
No, I have to give you the details, off the record.
Okay.
That way, we don't spoil the curriculums in the books, but
Okay.
it's out there.
Okay.
If you scroll down, I don't know if you want to do this, but if you scroll to the first picture on my Instagram, Young Black Mayor,
Okay.
who gave me the key to the city, the first.
Okay. I will look that up right away. Come closer. Come closer.
It's a very important person.
Okay.
And it is the greatest mentor that I can gain for what I'm doing in my mission. So
Beautiful.
I'll leave you with that.
The world's a better place with you, Derrick. Thank you.
Thanks. That's
Thank
big.
you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be in touch.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Here is the picture that Derrick was alluding to with Ambassador Andrew Young. And here is the key to the city that Ambassador Young gave to Derrick. Here's a quote from Derrick that is his motivation. This is how to get a hold of Derrick, get more information from him, and I hope we will stay in touch. Thank you for being here.